You've heard the Stargate sound 1,000 times. The deep rumble as the inner ring spins, the mechanical thunder of each symbol locking into place, the final ka-chunk before the event horizon explodes outward in a shimmering wave of liquid light. Tonight, deep in the heart of Cheyenne Mountain, it sounds different. Tonight, it sounds like something is answering back. The fluorescent lights flicker in the gate room as klaxons scream their warning through concrete corridors. Your hand hovers over the console, heart hammering against your ribs, because unauthorized activations mean one thing: someone uninvited is trying to get in. The iris, that titanium barrier between Earth and whatever nightmare waits on the other side, slams shut with a sound like a coffin closing. You should feel safer. You don't. The symbols lock faster than any dialing sequence you've ever witnessed. 7 chevrons encoded in under 30 seconds, each one snapping into position with surgical precision. Major Carter's voice cuts through the chaos, sharp and focused as always, but there's something underneath it you've never heard before. Confusion bordering on fear. Those coordinates aren't in our database, she says, fingers flying across her keyboard. They're not from any known gate address. Colonel, I don't think these are spatial coordinates at all. General Hammond stands rigid beside the control window, jaw set, decades of military bearing, keeping his expression neutral, even as the impossible unfolds before him. Around you, security teams raised weapons toward the Stargate, red laser sights dancing across the iris like nervous fireflies. The air smells of ozone and adrenaline. Something is very, very wrong. The event horizon forms, but it doesn't behave. Instead of the usual violent burst followed by stable shimmer, it stutters. The watery surface ripples backward and forward simultaneously, like a film reel playing out of sequence. Technicians shout readings that make no sense. Temporal variance, chronoton particles, phrases pulled from theoretical physics papers that should have nothing to do with a stable wormhole. You watch as the event horizon kisses the iris, and for one impossible moment, you see through both, through solid titanium and liquid spacetime, into something that looks like the inside of your grandmother's living room, superimposed over an alien world you've never visited. Time is catching, time is breaking, and then, between one heartbeat and the next, something impossible happens. A blue box appears in the gate room, as if it were always there. Not through the Stargate, not materializing in that familiar sparkle of Asgard transport beams. It's simply present, standing 3 meters from the ramp, a tall blue police box that belongs on a London street corner circa 1960, not in the most secure military installation on the planet. The wood looks weathered, but solid. A light on top pulses with a soft, almost organic rhythm. In the stunned silence following the event horizon's collapse, you can hear something that makes your skin crawl. The sound of breathing. Not human breathing. Deeper, slower, like the box itself is alive and resting after a long journey. Security teams adjust their aim. Red dots converging on the door. Someone near you whispers a prayer. General Hammond's hand moves to the red phone, the one that connects directly to the Pentagon, to the President, to protocols designed for the end of the world. Then, clear as a bell in a cathedral, someone knocks from inside the box. 3 sharp raps, polite and cheerful, completely at odds with the 14 assault rifles currently pointed at the door. The knocking comes again, followed by a muffled voice. Hello? I don't mean to be rude, but is anyone going to answer? Only I've traveled quite a long way, and I'm fairly certain I'm in the wrong century. Again, the door opens inward, which shouldn't be possible in a box that size, and a figure steps out into the harsh light of the gate room. The man looks unremarkable at first glance. Rumpled clothes, kind face, eyes that seem simultaneously young and impossibly old. He blinks at the assembled weapons with what appears to be genuine surprise, then turns to look at the Stargate behind him. His expression shifts. The kindness remains, but something colder slides underneath it. Something ancient and absolute. "Oh," he says quietly, and the single syllable carries more weight than any threat you've ever heard. "That's not a doorway. That's a wound." He takes a step forward, hands visible but not raised, moving with the calm certainty of someone who has walked into 1,000 hostile receptions and walked out of all of them. Behind him, you catch a glimpse inside the box, an impossible interior of warm golden light, columns and corridors stretching into geometric infinity. Then the door swings shut, and physics reasserts itself with an almost audible snap. The man, this impossible intruder, looks directly at you, and his smile is kind again, almost apologetic. "I'm called the Doctor," he says as security teams close in, "and I'm terribly sorry, but your planet has approximately 48 hours before something notices you've been playing with time." The fluorescent lights flicker again. In the silence, you hear the Stargate's ring tick once, settling like a clock winding down. If you want to see what happens when a Time Lord crashes into humanity's most classified military operation, and whether the SGC survives contact with someone who treats the laws of physics as gentle suggestions, make sure you're subscribed. Because this is where a universe built on protocol meets a man who has toppled empires with nothing but words and a refusal to carry a gun. Security surrounds the Doctor now, weapons trained, voices demanding he raise his hands, state his business, explain how he bypassed every security system between the surface and the gate room. He doesn't raise his hands. He doesn't explain. Instead, he looks past Hammond, past Carter, past the soldiers, directly at the Stargate itself. And something in his expression makes you understand that whatever protection you thought that iris provided, whatever safety, 28 levels of mountain and titanium offered, it just evaporated. "You've been dialing out," the Doctor says softly, "for years, all across the galaxy, leaving your scent on every world, every coordinate, every destination." His eyes are still kind, but they hold a truth you don't want to hear. "Do you have any idea how many things out there have been following you home?" The briefing room feels smaller than usual with the Doctor sitting in it. He hasn't been restrained. 4 attempts to apply handcuffs resulted in them somehow cuffing the guards to each other instead. But 6 armed airmen stand along the walls anyway, fingers resting on trigger guards. General Hammond sits at the head of the table, jaw tight, while Major Carter occupies the seat closest to the Doctor, laptop open, scanner discreetly pointed at him under the table. Colonel O'Neill leans against the wall, arms crossed, projecting the kind of casual threat that comes from years of dealing with false gods and living lies. You stand near the door, taking notes, trying to reconcile the cheerful man sipping terrible coffee with the fact that he appeared inside a sealed military complex through a blue box that's bigger on the inside. The Doctor seems utterly unconcerned, even as Hammond's questions hit like hammer blows. "The Stargate program is classified at the highest levels," Hammond begins, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "You've infiltrated a secure facility, bypassed systems designed to detect threats from across the galaxy, and made claims about temporal mechanics that border on science fiction. I need answers, Doctor, starting with what you are." The Doctor sets down his coffee cup with exaggerated care, and for a moment his expression shifts, something vast and weary looking out through human eyes. "I'm a traveler," he says simply. "I go where I'm needed, where the universe is crying out, where time itself is screaming for help. And right now, General Hammond, it's screaming here." He leans forward, and despite the guards, despite the weapons, everyone in the room feels the balance of power shift. "As for what I am, I'm the last thing between you and the consequences of what you've been doing with that ring downstairs." Major Carter can't help herself. You've watched her dissect gold technology, reverse engineer ancient devices, stand face to face with gods and call their bluff with physics. Now she looks at the doctor like he's an equation she's dying to solve. "Your box," she says, ignoring Hammond's warning glance. The interior space exceeds exterior dimensions by several orders of magnitude. That's not just advanced technology, that's reality manipulation, dimensional transcendence. The energy requirements alone should be impossible. The doctor's smile returns, genuine and warm. "Should be, yes, but the TARDIS doesn't work on should. She works on ease, time and relative dimension in space. She's alive, Major Carter, not programmed, not engineered, grown. She's a ship that exists in more than 4 dimensions, and she brought me here because she heard something that frightened her." He pauses, and the warmth drains from his voice. "The Stargate network. You call it a transportation system. She calls it a scar." O'Neill speaks for the first time, his tone deceptively light. "We've been using the gate for 5 years. Explored dozens of worlds, made allies, stopped the Goa'uld from invading Earth. If it's so dangerous, why hasn't anyone else mentioned it?" The doctor's laugh is short and bitter, because everyone else who knows what these things really are either built them and left warnings you haven't found yet, or they're too terrified to come near them. "Colonel O'Neill, every time you activate that device, you're punching holes through space-time. Usually, the universe heals. Usually. But you're not just dialing occasionally. You're doing it constantly, hundreds of times. You've turned Earth into the most active node in a network that was supposed to be dormant." He stands, and despite the guards tensing, he simply walks to the window overlooking the gate room. "You've been teaching a knife how to sing, and something out there is learning the melody. The explanation that follows is delivered in fragments. The doctor pacing like a professor who knows his students won't believe the lecture. The Stargate network wasn't designed by the ancients as simple location. By a species still learning the technology, it creates something else entirely, a beacon, but for the Goa'uld, who the doctor dismisses as parasites playing dress-up. Not for the replicators, though his face darkens when Carter mentions them. A beacon for things that exist outside normal time. Things that notice when a primitive species starts tearing holes in reality and leaving them open. "You've made Earth important," the doctor says quietly. "And in this galaxy, being important is often fatal." The briefing dissolves into argument. Hammond demands proof. O'Neill questions the doctor's credentials. Carter fills 3 whiteboards with equations trying to model what the doctor describes, half convincing herself it could be true. Through it all, the doctor remains patient, answering technical questions with frightening accuracy, deflecting personal ones with practiced ease. You watch him carefully avoid mentioning where he's from, how old he is, whether there are others like him. When Hammond directly asks if the doctor himself is a threat, he goes very still. "I'm the threat to threats, General. I'm what shows up when good people are about to make choices that end civilizations. I'm the reminder that you don't have to become monsters to fight them." His voice softens. "But yes, if you give me reason to be, if you choose to weaponize what you don't understand, if you put this planet at risk because you can't resist playing with fire, then I can be the most dangerous thing you've ever met. The turning point comes when Carter pulls up classified footage on the main screen. The Eurondans, the Ashen, worlds where the SGC made contact, found allies, and barely escaped betrayal. We've made mistakes, she admits, and you can see it costs her to say it aloud. We've walked into traps, trusted the wrong people, but we've also saved billions, stopped plagues, prevented invasions. The Stargate gives us the ability to protect Earth and help others. The Doctor watches the footage in silence, his expression unreadable. When it ends, he turns to face the room, and something in his posture has changed. Less confrontational, more considering. Your soldiers, he says finally. Following orders, protecting your world, trying to do right with limited information and unlimited danger. I understand that. I've fought beside people like you across more worlds than you can imagine. He looks directly at Hammond. But understanding doesn't mean agreeing, and it doesn't mean I'll let you continue down a path that ends with Earth as a crater and timeline as a cautionary tale. Hammond stands, decision crystallizing across his features with the finality of a closing blast door. You'll be our guest until we determine your intentions and capabilities. Comfortable quarters, no restraints, but you don't leave this facility without authorization. Major Carter, I want a full analysis of the Doctor's claims. Colonel O'Neill, security detail stays sharp. If that box tries to leave, he stops, because the Doctor is laughing. Not mockery, something sadder. General, you can't contain the TARDIS. She's already left and arrived, and departed from this moment, in 40 different timelines. She's outside your causality. I'm only still here because I choose to be, because running would mean leaving you to face what's coming alone. He meets Hammond's eyes with perfect honesty. You want my help? Then give me 1 day. 1 day of cooperation. Let me examine your gate, your records, your enemies, and if I'm lying, if I'm the threat you fear, then I'll walk through that Stargate myself and never return. The room falls silent. Outside, through the reinforced glass, you can see the blue police box sitting in the gate room. Impossibly solid, impossibly present, and somewhere in the mountain's depths, the Stargate waits, patient as stone, hungry as time. The mission briefing is routine by SGC standards, which means potentially lethal by any sane measure. P3X888, designated uninhabited after preliminary UAV reconnaissance, shows ancient ruins consistent with outpost architecture, the kind of find that could contain technology, weapons or knowledge worth risking lives to secure. SG-1 will gate in, conduct reconnaissance, collect samples, and return within 6 hours. Standard procedure, except this time, the Doctor insisted on joining, and Hammond, after a night of deliberation and encrypted calls to Washington, agreed. You watch from the control room as the team assembles at the base of the ramp, O'Neill checking his P90 with practiced efficiency, Carter reviewing scanner protocols, Teal standing motionless as carved stone, and the Doctor among them, wearing the same rumpled suit, carrying nothing but a peculiar metallic device he calls a sonic screwdriver. He looks absurdly out of place. O'Neill has already made 3 jokes about it. None of them were funny. The gate activates with its familiar roar, chevrons locking, event horizon establishing in a cascade of shimmering energy. You've watched hundreds of teams step through that liquid mirror, disappearing into the unknown, with courage that still takes your breath away. But watching the Doctor approach the Stargate is different. He pauses at the base of the ramp, head tilted, that sonic device extended toward the event horizon, like a divining rod. The tip glows blue, emitting a sound that makes your teeth ache. Fascinating, he murmurs, loud enough for the control room microphones to pick up. The wormhole is stable, but there's echo interference, temporal, like someone's been screaming through this connection so loudly that the gate itself remembers it. He glances up at the control room window, directly at you despite the reflective glass. Whatever happened on the other side wasn't pleasant. Then he steps through, and the team follows, and the event horizon swallows them like a stone dropped into still water. P3X888 greets them with silence. The MEL-P footage didn't do the ruins justice. Towering structures of that distinctive ancient architecture, all graceful curves and geometric precision, half buried in red sand beneath an orange sky. Two suns burn overhead, smaller than Sol, casting double shadows that make depth perception unreliable. Carter's readings show no life signs, no energy signatures, nothing but wind and stone, and the weight of abandonment. O'Neill's signals advance, and the team spreads into standard formation, weapons ready, moving through corridors, carved from rock that humanity won't learn to work for another 1,000 years. The Doctor walks among them, but apart from them, sonic screwdriver sweeping, occasionally kneeling to examine symbols carved into walls, his expression growing increasingly troubled. "Something's wrong," he says, just as you're about to report the same thing from your monitoring station 28 levels beneath Cheyenne Mountain. These ruins aren't old, they're young. The temporal distortion hits without warning. One moment, the team is advancing through a plaza of shattered columns. The next, Carter stumbles, pointing at the ground with shaking hands. Footprints in the dust, fresh boot treads, 5 sets, leading from the Stargate to their current position. Except no one has walked that path yet. They came through a different corridor. Teal's staff weapon charges with a whine that sounds like a question. O'Neill's tactical instincts scream trap, his weapon sweeping for targets that aren't there. The Doctor kneels beside the footprints, sonic screwdriver shrieking at frequencies that make the video feed distort. "Time echo," he says, voice tight with something between fascination and horror. "You're seeing where you're going to walk. The effect is stronger here, anchored to this location. Someone used ancient technology to create a causality loop, a trap that springs before you enter it." He looks up, meeting O'Neill's eyes through the chaos of overlapping moments. "We need to leave, now. Too late." The ruins activate with a sound like reality tearing. Walls that appeared solid shimmer and reconfigure. Corridors sealing. New passages opening with geometric precision that ignores physical space. The team is separated in seconds. Teal's pulled down one hallway, Carter another. O'Neill shouting orders into a radio that transmits only static. You watch from 6 camera feeds as the facility rewrites itself around them. Ancient security protocols responding to intruders with mechanical efficiency. Except the Doctor doesn't run. He stands in the center of the chaos, sonic screwdriver raised, and begins to move through a sequence of actions that makes no logical sense. He touches 3 specific stones in a doorway, hums a note that matches the facility's underlying frequency, reverses direction mid-step, and walks backward exactly 7 paces, and the ruins respond, not with violence, with curiosity. Passages that were sealing pause, walls that were closing stop. The ancient facility is listening. "Hello," the Doctor says softly, speaking to the walls themselves. "I know what you are. Security system, Guardian protocol.
You were left here to protect something, and you've been alone for so long you've forgotten the difference between threats and visitors. His voice carries that peculiar quality you've noticed before, authority mixed with compassion, the tone of someone addressing a frightened child rather than alien machinery. The people with me aren't here to steal, they're here to learn, to remember what the ancients left behind. Let me show you. He does something with the sonic screwdriver, and suddenly the video feeds fill with light, soft, golden, the color of ancient sunlight. The ancient facility pulses once, twice, then the walls begin to open, corridors realign. Teals emerges from one passage, Carter from another, both weapons ready, but unharmed. O'Neill appears last, looking equal parts relieved and furious. The doctor offers him a small smile. Sometimes you don't need weapons. Sometimes you just need to listen. The team regroups in what appears to be a central chamber, a vast circular room, with a domed ceiling depicting star maps that shift and rotate as you watch. Carter is immediately absorbed in documenting everything, scanners working overtime, her scientific excitement barely contained. Teal stands guard, but even he seems affected by the beauty of this place. A reminder that the Ghouls stole their technology from beings who created wonders without tyranny. O'Neill remains practical, checking exits, counting ammunition, but you catch him glancing at the doctor with something that might be grudging respect. The doctor himself has stopped before a central pedestal, studying an ancient console with an expression of deep concentration. This outpost was a monitoring station, he explains, hands hovering over controls he doesn't quite touch. The ancients used it to watch temporal stability across this sector. They were worried.
About something that could break time itself if left unchecked. His fingers trace symbols that predate human civilization. They were watching the gates. Then Carter makes the mistake, a small one, understandable, even. She activates her subspace transmitter to relay findings back to SGC, standard procedure, necessary for mission logging. But the ancient facility responds to the transmission like a body responds to infection. Alarms erupt, not claxons, but a harmonic tone that vibrates through bone and makes vision blur. The star map ceiling goes red. The doctor spins, sonic screwdriver screaming, and for the first time since arriving, you see fear naked on his face. You've just broadcast Earth's gate signature with ancient encryption codes, he shouts over the rising alarm. This facility was designed to alert, oh no, oh no, no, no. The chamber shudders. Something ancient and vast and buried deep in the planet's crust is waking up. The video feeds show movement in the tunnels below, not geological, intentional, purposeful, coming toward them with the patience of stone and the hunger of epochs. It was a monitoring station, the doctor says quietly, helping Carter kill the transmission with hands that work faster than thought. But it was also a prison, and you just rang the dinner bell. The retreat is controlled chaos, the team moving fast but not panicking. Years of training overriding the very reasonable urge to run screaming. The doctor leads them back toward the gate, through corridors that are growing warmer, the air thick with ozone and something else. Something that tastes of copper and makes your bones ache in sympathy. 28 levels deep. Behind them, through the facility's internal sensors, You watch something emerge from the depths. Not a creature, not a machine. Something in between. Ancient technology that evolved past its programming. Lonely guardians that forgot what they were guarding and remember only hunger. They move like liquid metal, reforming around obstacles, absorbing the ruined structure into themselves. The doctor's face on the monitor is grim. He knows they won't make it to the gate before those things reach the surface. So instead of running, he stops, turns, faces what's coming with nothing but that sonic device and a smile that doesn't reach his eyes. "Get to the gate," he tells O'Neill. "I'll buy you time." O'Neill's response is immediate and absolute. Not a chance. The standoff lasts 3 seconds. O'Neill levels his weapon at the approaching mass of liquid metal and ancient technology. Teal's staff weapon already charging. Carter calculating firing solutions that you both know won't work against something that reforms faster than bullets can tear it apart. The doctor doesn't argue. Instead, he does something impossible with his sonic screwdriver. The device screams at a frequency that makes the video feeds white out, and the ancient facility responds like a trained animal, obeying its master's voice. Stone walls slam down between the team and the pursuing guardians. Massive blast doors that haven't moved in 10,000 years suddenly remembering their purpose. The ground shakes. Dust rains from ceilings that have stood since before humanity learned to build with mud bricks. "Run," the doctor says calmly, as behind them, something begins chewing through solid stone with patience measured in seconds rather than millennia. The team runs. You count their footsteps through audio feeds, tracking their desperate sprint through corridors that seem to stretch with every stride. Ancient geometry warping space as casually as the doctor warps expectations. They burst into the gate room, not the SGC's familiar concrete chamber, but P3X888's open-air plaza, where the Stargate stands beneath twin suns like a god's abandoned toy. Carter is already dialing Earth, fingers flying over the DHD, while Teals and O'Neill establish a perimeter that feels absurdly inadequate against what's coming. The doctor doesn't help. He stands before the Stargate, sonic screwdriver extended, making adjustments to the forming wormhole that should be impossible. The event horizon stutters, shifts through colors that don't belong in normal space-time, stabilizes into something that looks almost but not quite right. "I'm buying us 30 seconds, he shouts over the roar of the unstable connection. The Guardians can follow through gates, but not through time-shifted wormholes. It'll confuse them, briefly. Behind them, the facility's walls explode outward in the spray of ancient stone and liquid metal. The Guardians emerge into sunlight for the first time in epochs, and they are beautiful and terrible. Flowing shapes that catch the light like mercury, studded with ancient technology that pulses with purpose older than memory. O'Neill grabs the doctor's shoulder and physically throws him toward the gate. "Move, move." The team plunges through the event horizon in a cascade of desperate motion. Teals first providing cover, then Carter, then O'Neill, practically tackling the doctor through the liquid mirror. You watch from the SGC control room as they tumble out of the wormhole, collapsing on the ramp, and immediately you're screaming for the iris to close. It slams shut with that familiar titanium thunder just as something impacts it from the other side. A sound like a bell made of bones, resonating through the entire mountain. Once, twice, 3 times, then silence. The wormhole disengages. The gate room is filled with personnel rushing to check the team, medics and security and technicians all shouting over each other, and the doctor sits on the ramp,
breathing hard, staring at the Stargate with an expression you can't quite read. Horror, maybe, or recognition, or both. "They'll remember us now," he says quietly. "The Guardians, they've tasted Earth's signature through that connection, and they're patient. They'll wait." The debriefing lasts 4 hours and accomplishes nothing, except confirming what everyone already knows. The mission was a disaster. Carter's unauthorized transmission, authorized, technically by standard procedure, but catastrophic in execution, has painted a target on Earth using ancient encryption that predates human civilization. The Tok'ra send an urgent message through their usual channels, received 3 hours after the team returns. Their intelligence network has detected unusual chatter among multiple Go system lords. Words like Tari weapon and ancient guardian, and temporal advantage appearing in communications previously devoted to territorial disputes and political maneuvering. Commander Thor of the Asgard High Council transmits a rare personal message to General Hammond. "We have detected ancient-level temporal distortions originating from Earth. This technology is beyond your current capabilities. We must discuss this matter immediately. The galaxy is adjusting, and Earth is suddenly at the center of attention it cannot afford." The Doctor spends those 4 hours in the gate room, alone except for security details that keep their distance. You watch him through cameras, this impossible man who appeared in a blue box and saved your team with nothing but words and a sonic device. He circles the Stargate slowly, occasionally reaching out to touch its surface with a gentleness that seems inappropriate for 9 tons of carved Nakada. He's talking to it. You can see his lips moving, though audio can't pick up the words. Talking to the gate like he talked to the ancient facility, like it's alive and listening and capable of response. When Carter finally joins him, exhausted from debriefing and running on coffee and stubborn will, he doesn't turn around. "It's frightened," he says simply. "The Stargate, it's been used as a weapon so many times by so many species that it's forgotten it was meant to be a bridge." Carter starts to protest. Gates don't have consciousness, then stops, because she's been working with ancient technology long enough to know that consciousness is a spectrum, not a binary. "What did we do?" she asks. "On P3X888, what did that transmission actually accomplish?" The Doctor finally turns to face her, and his expression is kind but uncompromising. "You announced Earth's presence to every ancient monitoring system still functional in this galaxy, not intentionally, not maliciously, but definitively. Those Guardians we woke, they're just the beginning. The ancients built fail-safes, Major Carter, security protocols designed to contain species who might misuse their technology, and right now, Earth is lighting up every single one of those protocols like a distress beacon." He gestures at the Stargate with something approaching affection despite the dire words. "The problem is scale. You've been using this network for 5 years, learning as you go, making mistakes and fixing them and surviving by luck and courage, and occasionally brilliant improvisation. But from the perspective of ancient systems, your children playing with nuclear weapons, and the galaxy's babysitters are starting to pay attention." Carter's face goes pale. "How do we stop it?" The Doctor's smile is sad. "You can't. You can only choose what happens next, and that choice is going to define whether Earth survives or becomes another cautionary tale carved into ancient ruins." The situation escalates over the next 18 hours in ways that make your blood run cold. Intelligence reports flood in from every source the SGC has cultivated across the galaxy. The Tok'ra confirm that Apophis, newly resurrected and hungry for revenge, has diverted 3 Hartak-class vessels toward the coordinates where Earth's transmission originated. BAAL, ever the strategist, has begun consolidating power among minor system lords by promising access to Torai temporal technology. Even the isolated Sodan, a group of Jaffa warriors who renounced the gold centuries ago, send an emissary through a mutual contact. We have seen strange lights in the sky above worlds we protect, ancient patterns. The Torai have awakened something they do not understand. Most concerning is a report from Area 51, analyzing data from the ancient outpost buried beneath Antarctica. The repository that nearly killed O'Neill with knowledge has begun showing activity, symbols lighting up in sequences that don't match any known ancient database, as if it's responding to something calling across the void. In the SGC conference room, battle lines form along predictable fractures. General Hammond advocates for immediate defensive measures, accelerate the BC-303 development, reach out to allied worlds for military support, prepare Earth for the siege that seems increasingly inevitable. The NID representative, a sharp-eyed woman named Barrett, who arrived on a presidential order, pushes for the opposite: capture the Doctor, reverse engineer the TARDIS, use whatever advantage they can extract before Earth's enemies do the same. O'Neill argues for a middle path. Let the Doctor help, but verify everything. Trust but prepare for betrayal. Carter presents the scientific perspective. The technology they've encountered is beyond current.
Human comprehension and attempting to weaponize what they don't understand is precisely what got them into this situation. Tilak offers the only certainty. The Goa'uld will come. They always do. The question is whether we will stand divided or united when they arrive. The Doctor sits at the table listening, saying nothing. His silence somehow louder than the shouting. When he finally speaks, the room falls quiet. "You're all asking the wrong question," he says, voice soft but carrying absolute conviction. "You're debating how to survive what's coming, how to fight, how to win. But the real question is, why are you worth saving?" The room erupts in protest. Hammond's face darkening, Barrett standing with accusations ready, O'Neill's hand moving unconsciously toward his sidearm. The Doctor raises a hand, and somehow, impossibly, they all stop. I've seen 1,000 species reach this exact moment. The point where they have just enough power to attract attention, just enough knowledge to be dangerous, but not enough wisdom to understand the consequences. Most of them choose weapons. Most of them choose to become what they're fighting, and most of them don't survive the century. He looks at each person in turn, and you feel the weight of his gaze even through camera feeds. Earth has a choice. You can become another empire fighting for dominance with stolen ancient technology, or you can become something else, something rarer, something that might actually deserve the stars. The meeting ends without resolution, which means it will resume with higher authorities and harder positions. You watch the doctor leave the conference room, escorted by security that's more honor guard than prison detail. And you realize the truth that everyone else is still avoiding. This man with his blue box and impossible knowledge has become the single most valuable and dangerous asset on Earth. Multiple governments want him. Multiple alien species are searching for him. And somewhere in the depths of Channing Mountain, sitting in a gate room under armed guard, the TARDIS waits with the patience of something that experiences all moments simultaneously. The galaxy has adjusted. Earth is no longer an insignificant world playing with ancient toys. Earth is important, and as the Doctor warned, being important is often fatal. Outside your monitoring station, klaxons begin their familiar wail. Unscheduled gate activation. Incoming wormhole. You bring up the iris control with shaking hands and realize with crystal clarity that everything that happens next will determine whether humanity becomes legend or becomes a lesson. The gate connects and something begins knocking. The knocking continues with mechanical precision. 3 strikes, pause, 3 strikes, pause, transmitted through the closed iris like a heartbeat made of patience and titanium. Hammond's voice cuts through the tension from the control room. Hold fire. Send standard challenge. You watch through monitors as a technician transmits the IDC request. That simple digital handshake that separates allies from enemies in a galaxy full of both. The response comes not as code, but as a voice, transmitted through the open wormhole with crystalline clarity, despite 28 levels of mountain and 9 tons of reinforced Nekadar standing between you and the speaker. This is you, the Great, eldest of the System Lords, seeking audience with the Tauri under flag of parley. I am alone, unarmed, and request the courtesy your protocols afford diplomatic contact. The control room erupts in controlled chaos, staff checking records, Hammond on 3 phones simultaneously, security teams converging on the gate room. The Doctor appears at your elbow without warning, and you manage not to jump. Open it, he says quietly. This is the conversation that determines everything. You enters through the iris with the bearing of someone who has walked through 1,000 toward her laptop, already calculating defensive scenarios. O'Neill's jaw clenches with the rage of someone facing impossible odds for the 1,000th time. The Doctor picks up the data crystal, examining it with his sonic screwdriver, the device chirping with confirmation that the information is genuine. This is accurate, he says, and his voice carries a weariness that makes him sound ancient despite his youthful appearance. 3 Hess, minimum. Maybe more, if they can convince others to join. They'll come through the gate simultaneously, if they can coordinate it, or attack from orbit if they can't. He looks at you with new understanding. You didn't come here to recruit Earth, you came to warn us. Because if these 3 succeed in acquiring my technology, the balance you've spent millennia maintaining collapses completely. They'll use what they learn from the TARDIS to attack you. You inclines his head in acknowledgement. Now you begin to understand the complexities of governance. Doctor, I am not altruistic. I am practical. Earth's survival benefits my interests. Your destruction benefits my enemies. Therefore, I help you. The morality is irrelevant. He turns to Hammond. I suggest you begin preparations, General. 48 hours is not long to save a world. You departs through the Stargate as he arrived, alone, bearing himself with the dignity of someone who has played a long game across centuries and sees this as merely another move. The moment the wormhole disengages, the control room explodes into activity. Hammond begins issuing orders. Contact the Tok'ra. Get the BC 303 online early, even if incomplete. Recall all off-world teams. Activate emergency protocols that will put Earth's military on alert without revealing the truth of alien invasion. Carter is already modeling the attack, calculating how 3 Hess could overwhelm Earth's defenses even with the ancient weapon in Antarctica, which they can't risk using without killing whoever activates it. O'Neill argues for a preemptive strike, hitting them before they coordinate, while Teal'c provides tactical assessments that make clear how desperate their situation truly is. And through it all, you watch the Doctor standing before the TARDIS, one hand resting on her blue wooden surface, having a conversation with his ship that no one else can hear. When he finally turns back to the room, his expression is resolved. "I can stop this," he says, "but you're not going to like how." The briefing room feels like a tomb. Everyone who matters is present. Hammond at the head of the table, SG-1 clustered on one side, technical specialists and military advisors filling the remaining seats, and you standing against the wall with your tablet, recording everything for archives that might never be read if the next 48 hours go wrong. The Doctor stands before a whiteboard covered in symbols that look like ancient mathematics married to temporal physics. Equations that make Carter's eyes light up with fascination and Hammond's jaw tighten with suspicion. The problem, the Doctor begins without preamble, is not that 3 system lords are attacking Earth. The problem is that they're attacking Earth now, at this specific moment, in this specific timeline. Change the now, and you change everything. He taps the board where he's drawn what looks like a river branching into tributaries. Time isn't fixed. It's fluid, malleable. With the right application of temporal mechanics and ancient technology, I can shift Earth approximately 6 hours into the future, not through space, but through time itself. When Apophis, Cronus, and Nerti arrive at the coordinates you provided, Earth won't be here to attack. The silence that follows is absolute. Carter is the first to speak, her voice careful, measured, the tone of someone walking through a minefield of implications. You're talking about a temporal displacement field, moving an entire planet forward in its own timeline, without affecting its spatial position or orbital mechanics. The Doctor nods, pleased someone understands. Precisely. The Earth will still be here, right where it should be gravitationally, but separated from the attacking fleet by 6 hours of causal time. To them, it will appear Earth simply vanished. Impossible to target, impossible to attack. They'll spend those 6 hours searching, arguing, eventually turning on each other as paranoid dictators always do. By the time Earth reappears in their timeline, they'll have scattered, the alliance will have fractured, and the immediate threat will have passed. O'Neill leans back in his chair, arms crossed. Okay, I'll bite. What's the catch? Because there's always a catch with the good plans. The Doctor's smile is sad. The catch, Colonel, is that temporal displacement on a planetary scale requires an anchor. Someone to hold the timeline steady while the field activates. Someone to experience every second of those 6 hours while existing outside the normal flow of causality. Hammond's voice is granite. What happens to this anchor? The Doctor doesn't look away, doesn't soften the blow, and you respect him for that even as horror crawls up your spine. They experience temporal recursion, 6 hours compressed and repeated, and overlaid, until they're living all possible variations of those 6 hours simultaneously. Imagine feeling every outcome, every choice, every consequence of those 6 hours happening at once inside your mind. It's survivable. The human brain has remarkable plasticity, but the psychological damage is profound and permanent. They'll remember futures that didn't happen, experience deaths they didn't die, know outcomes of conversations that never occurred. They'll be fractured across probability until they can't distinguish what's real from what's possible. The room erupts. O'Neill is on his feet. Hammond's hand slams the table, voices overlapping in protest and denial and rage. Through the chaos, Carter's question cuts like a surgical laser. How many times have you done this? How many people have you sacrificed as anchors to save worlds? The doctor meets her eyes, and the age in his gaze is bottomless. Twice, both times, I was the anchor. Both times, I barely survived. Both times, I carry those fractured timelines inside me like shrapnel. Teal speaks into the shocked silence, his deep voice carrying the weight of someone who has served false gods and learned the true cost of survival. If the doctor cannot serve as the anchor himself, then who must make this sacrifice? The doctor turns to the whiteboard, avoiding eye contact, and you realize he's been dreading this question since he proposed the plan. It requires someone with a strong connection to Earth, a native human, whose timeline is deeply rooted in this planet's causal structure. It requires someone who has already experienced temporal anomalies, whose consciousness has been exposed to time distortion and survived. Someone whose mind has touched ancient knowledge. His hand rests on the board, trembling slightly. It requires someone who has been inhabited by the ancient repository. Someone whose neural pathways have already been rewritten to handle information no human brain was designed to process. Every eye in the room turns to O'Neill. The colonel's face goes white, then red, then settles into a mask of controlled fury. You've got to be kidding me. His voice is deadly quiet. I almost died from that damn database. It took the Asgard downloading the entire thing to save my life. And I still have nightmares about knowing things I shouldn't know. Now you want to plug me into your temporal anchor and scramble my brain all over again. The doctor finally meets O'Neill's eyes, and what you see pass between them is complicated. Respect, sorrow, understanding, and an absolute refusal to lie about what's being up. I'm not asking you to do anything, Colonel. I'm presenting the only option I have to save 7 billion lives without firing a shot or starting a war that Earth cannot win. Yes, it will damage you. Yes, you'll carry scars no one else can see. Yes, every day for the rest of your life, you'll remember timelines where you made different choices, where your team died, where Earth burned. He spreads his hands in a gesture of helpless honesty. But you'll be alive to remember. Your planet will survive. Your people will have a future. That's not nothing. That's everything. O'Neill stares at him for a long moment, then turns to Hammond. Sir, request permission to volunteer for this insane plan so I can punch the doctor in his smug face when it's over. Hammond opens his mouth to deny the request, to find another way, to order the doctor to use someone else, or find a different solution. Before he can speak, O'Neill continues, because we all know there isn't another option. We all know I'm the only one who fits the requirements. And we all know that if we don't do this, those system lords will hit us with everything they have. Carter is shaking her head. Tears in her eyes she refuses to let fall. There has to be another way. We could evacuate key personnel through the gate, scatter Earth's leadership across friendly worlds, rebuild somewhere else, and abandon 7 billion people to orbital bombardment. O'Neill cuts her off gently. Come on, Carter. You know that's not an option. We either protect Earth, or we lose what makes us worth protecting in the first place.
He turns back to the doctor. How long do I have before this thing starts? Because I need to put my affairs in order. Write some letters. Maybe visit a few places one last time while I can still remember them correctly. The doctor checks his watch. An old-fashioned timepiece that somehow seems appropriate. 36 hours. We need 12 hours to modify the ancient outpost in Antarctica, to recalibrate the Stargate network to serve as relay points, to build the temporal field generator using TARDIS components, and ancient technology that shouldn't be compatible, but will be because I'm very, very good at making impossible things work. His voice softens. I'm sorry, Colonel O'Neill. Truly, if there were any other way. O'Neill waves him off. Save it. You're doing what you always do, making the hard choices so other people don't have to. I get it. I've been doing the same thing for 20 years. At least this time I know exactly what I'm sacrificing. The meeting continues for another hour. Technical details and contingency plans and protocols for a procedure that has never been attempted in this universe. Carter and the doctor work through calculations, building a theoretical framework that will let them anchor O'Neill's consciousness to Earth's timeline while displacing the planet through 6 hours of causal time. Teals offers his strength in that quiet way of his, standing beside O'Neill as a brother-in-arms facing the unwinnable fight together. Hammond makes the hardest calls, activating protocols that will move key military assets into position, drafting orders that will make sense only if the plan succeeds, writing contingencies for a world where their best tactical mind comes back broken. And through it all, you take notes, recording history as it happens, wondering if anyone
will ever believe that Earth was saved by a man in a blue box and a colonel who volunteered to shatter his own mind across probability. When the meeting finally ends, people file out in silence, each carrying the weight of what's coming. On the doctor lingers, waiting until only you and O'Neill remain. I need you to understand something, the doctor says quietly, speaking to O'Neill, but loud enough that you hear every word. In the timelines where this works, and it will work, I've seen it succeed, you become something remarkable. Not broken, not ruined, changed. You'll see possibilities before they happen. Understand cause and effect in ways that make you seem prescient. You'll make decisions that save lives, because you remember the futures where you didn't. He pauses, choosing words carefully. The ancients built into their technology a fundamental respect for consciousness. You won't be destroyed by this. You'll be transformed. That doesn't make it fair. It doesn't make it right. But it means there's hope beyond the sacrifice. O'Neill considers this, then laughs. Short, bitter, but genuine. You know what the worst part is? I believe you. I actually believe that in some weird way, having my brain scattered across 6 hours of timeline is going to make me a better officer. That's how insane this whole situation is. He stands, joints cracking from too many years of field work, and extends his hand. The doctor takes it. Try not to get me killed, Doc. I've got a fishing cabin that needs more quality time. The handshake holds for a moment longer than necessary. Two men who have saved worlds acknowledging the cost that no medal can honor. Then O'Neill leaves, and you're alone with the doctor in a briefing room that smells of stale coffee and impossible choices. Will he really be okay? You ask, your voice smaller than you intend. The doctor doesn't turn around, still staring at the whiteboard covered in equations that reduce human consciousness to mathematical variables. Define. Okay, he'll survive. He'll function. He'll continue serving. Continue making the impossible decisions that keep Earth safe. He finally looks at you, and his eyes carry the weight of all the anchors he's used. all the people he's transformed in the name of saving everyone else. But every morning, he'll wake up remembering dying in ways that never happened. Every decision, he'll see the paths not taken. Every person he loves, he'll know the timelines where he lost them. That's the price of miracles. Someone always pays, always. Outside the briefing room, klaxons begin their countdown. 36 hours until the temporal displacement. 36 hours until Earth vanishes from its enemies' targeting solutions. 36 hours until Colonel Jack O'Neill becomes a man living between moments, fractured across probability for the sake of a planet that will never fully understand what he sacrificed. The Doctor collects his notes, his equations, his impossible plan. "Come on," he says tiredly. "We have a planet to save and a good man to break. Might as well get started." Antarctica is beautiful in the way that lethal things often are. Endless white under a sky, so blue it hurts to look at. Wind that cuts through every layer of thermal gear. Cold that reminds you that Earth has places where human life is measured in hours without shelter. The ancient outpost sits buried beneath ice that fell before recorded history. A chamber of impossible technology that has twice nearly killed O'Neill, and now waits to consume him a third time. You stand in the control room that SGC engineers carved from glacial ice, watching through reinforced windows as the Colonel sits in the ancient chair, already connected to systems that glow with that distinctive orange light of Alteran engineering. Carter oversees the technical setup, her hands steady despite the tears she blinks away when she thinks no one is looking. Teal stands at O'Neill's right hand, silent as always, presence communicating what words cannot. The Doctor moves between ancient consoles and TARDIS components. He's somehow integrated into technology 10,000 years old. His sonic screwdriver singing complex harmonies that make the ice walls resonate. O'Neill looks small in the chair, not physically. He's still the same man who has walked through gates into hell and walked back out smiling. But context matters, and against the vast machinery of the ancients, against the weight of what he's about to endure, he seems impossibly fragile. So he says, voice carrying forced lightness over the chamber's speakers, "This is significantly less comfortable than my last visit. At least then I got to hallucinate in ancient before the download started eating my brain. What do I get this time? Preview of coming attractions." The Doctor pauses in his calibrations, something like respect crossing his features. "You'll get 6 hours, Colonel, just 6 hours. But you'll experience every possible variation of those 6 hours simultaneously. Every choice you might make, every word you might say, every outcome of every action across probability space. Your consciousness will stretch across approximately 8,000 discrete timelines, all overlapping, all equally real from your perspective." He meets O'Neill's eyes through the window. "By the end, you won't remember which timeline is yours. That's when I pull you back." The preparation takes another hour, fine-tuning temporal frequencies, aligning the Stargate network to serve as relay points, connecting the ancient chair to the TARDIS's temporal stabilizers in ways that make Carter's head hurt despite her genius-level understanding of multidimensional physics. The Doctor works with absolute focus, occasionally muttering in languages you don't recognize, cursing in what might be ancient or might be something older. When he's finally satisfied, he stands before O'Neill's chair one last time, expression grave. "Last chance to back out, Colonel. I won't think less of you. No one would. This isn't your responsibility." O'Neill's smile is crooked, familiar.
the expression of a man who has faced death so many times that fear has become just another tactical consideration. Doc, someone once told me that thing you said earlier is true. Someone always pays. Usually it's the people we're supposed to protect. Nice change of pace when it's someone who volunteered. He settles back into the chair, hands gripping the armrests. Let's get this over with before I remember. I'm supposed to be smart enough to refuse suicide missions. The temporal displacement field activates with a sound that shouldn't exist. Reality tearing, time folding, causality, bending around a fixed point. That is Jack O'Neill's consciousness. You watch through monitors as the ancient technology flares to life. Orange light flooding the chamber. The Stargate in the corner beginning to spin without being dialed. Energy cascades through the network, jumping from Antarctica to Cheyenne Mountain, to dozens of gates across the planet that SGC has secretly placed for just such emergencies. Earth begins to slip sideways through time, not moving spatially, but shifting temporally, 6 hours forward in its own causal timeline, while maintaining its gravitational position. To observers outside the field, the planet simply vanishes. They're one moment, gone the next, impossible to target, because it no longer exists in their frame of reference. And in the center of that impossible displacement, O'Neill screams, not with his voice. The ancient chair has paralyzed his body for safety, but through the neural interface, his consciousness broadcasting agony across every frequency the equipment can detect. Carter's hands fly across her console, monitoring neural activity that spikes far beyond human norms. Synaptic firing patterns that look like seizures, if seizures could be beautiful and terrible simultaneously. His consciousness is fragmenting, she reports, voice cracking, splitting across probability space exactly as predicted. But the cognitive load is exceeding safe parameters. Doctor, his mind is experiencing temporal recursion at a rate of 317 discrete timelines per subjective second. That's not sustainable. The doctor doesn't look up from his controls, fingers dancing across TARDIS interfaces with desperate speed. I know. I'm trying to slow the recursion, filter the probability streams, give him processing time between timeline splits. His mind is stronger than I calculated. He's not just experiencing the timelines, he's analyzing them, running tactical scenarios across 8,000 simultaneous futures. There's something like awe in his voice beneath the worry. He's weaponizing his own temporal fracturing, using it to see every possible attack vector, every defensive option, every outcome of every engagement. He's becoming what the ancients intended their technology to create, a consciousness that exists outside linear time. Then something goes wrong, not with O'Neill, not with the displacement field, but with the Stargate network itself. Alarms scream through the Antarctic facility as gates across Earth begin activating without authorization, connecting to addresses that aren't in any database, establishing wormholes to coordinates that shouldn't exist. On your monitors, you see the impossible. The gate in Antarctica is dialing simultaneously with gates in Russia, China, Australia, all of them creating stable event horizons at once, despite the fundamental law that only one gate can be active per planet at a time. The network is rejecting the displacement. Carter shouts over the klaxons. The gates are acting as pressure valves, trying to bleed off temporal energy by connecting to Doctor. These coordinates aren't spatial, they're temporal. The gates are dialing into Earth's own past and future simultaneously. The Doctor's face goes white. Shut it down. Shut it all down right now. If those connections establish fully, we'll create a temporal causality loop that traps Earth in a closed time-like curve. The planet will exist in all times and no times simultaneously, past and future, with no present anchoring it to reality. Hammond's voice cuts through from Cheyenne Mountain, transmitted across encrypted channels that sound like they're degrading under temporal stress. Doctor, we have multiple unscheduled activations. Gates are opening to Roman-era coordinates, to futures centuries ahead, to timelines that read as quantum probabilities rather than fixed coordinates. I've got incoming objects through 3 separate gates, artifacts from Earth's history returning, technology from Earth's future arriving before it's built. We're creating bootstrap paradoxes in real time. The situation cascades toward catastrophe with terrifying speed. Objects from Earth's past, a Viking sword, medieval texts, ancient artifacts that should still be buried, materialize through temporal gates while objects from possible futures pour through others. A piece of technology that looks like it was built yesterday, but carries manufacturing dates from 2157. Medical supplies marked with a Red Cross logo, redesigned in ways that haven't been conceived yet. Documentation of wars that haven't happened. Photographs of people who
haven't been born. Earth's timeline is eating itself, past and future collapsing into a present that can no longer hold both. O'Neill's consciousness, stretched across 8,000 timelines, feels the temporal collapse beginning. Through the neural interface, through his fractured perception, he sees what the Doctor fears most, a timeline where Earth becomes temporally locked, frozen in a moment that repeats eternally. 7 billion people experiencing the same 6 hours forever without knowing it. A timeline where the displacement field fails and the 3 system lords arrive to find Earth already destroyed by its own attempt to escape. A timeline where O'Neill himself becomes permanently fractured, his mind shattered across probability forever, unable to die, but never truly alive. And in the center of all those timelines, in the quantum space where all possibilities converge, he makes a choice. He can't speak. His body is paralyzed, his voice lost across 8,000 simultaneous realities. But he can think, and the ancient chair responds to thought better than it ever responded to speech. Through sheer force of will, through determination refined across 2 decades of impossible missions, through something that might be insanity or might be the clearest thinking any human has ever achieved. He grabs hold of all 8,000 timelines and pulls them together. The Antarctic facility shudders as O'Neill's consciousness becomes a singularity, a fixed point around which all possible Earths orbit. You watch his neural readings spike beyond anything human brains should survive. See patterns form in his synaptic firing that look like language, like mathematics, like music played on instruments that won't be invented for centuries. The Doctor is shouting something, hands moving across controls faster than you can track, trying to support what O'Neill is doing without understanding it fully. Carter stands frozen, watching her friend perform a miracle or commit suicide, unable to tell which. Teal places one hand on the ancient chair, grounding himself, his symbiote reading as terrified by whatever it's sensing. And through it all, the gates continue their impossible dialing, creating connections that loop through time itself, building a web of causality that holds Earth fixed in the present by anchoring it to all possible pasts and futures simultaneously. It shouldn't work. It violates every law of temporal mechanics the Doctor knows. But somehow, impossibly, Jack O'Neill is making it work anyway. The temporal displacement completes not with the smooth transition the Doctor planned, but with a violent snap that feels like the universe correcting a mistake. Earth settles back into linear time 6 hours forward from where it started. The Stargate network shutting down in cascading sequence, temporal gates collapsing back into spatial coordinates. In orbit above the planet, 3 Hashtag vessels arrive exactly where they expected to find Earth and find nothing. Empty space where their targeting computers insist a planet should be. Apophis screams orders at subordinates who have no answers. Cronus calculates trajectories that make no sense. Nearty runs sensor sweeps that show gravitational anomalies consistent with a planetary mass that isn't there. For 6 subjective hours from their perspective, hours that Earth has already experienced and moved beyond, the system lords search and argue, and eventually turn on each other, alliance fracturing under the weight of impossible failure. By the time Earth reappears in their timeline, they're already engaged in mutual combat, hashtags firing on each other, the temporary alliance destroyed by paranoia and confusion. The immediate threat ends not with a battle, but with bewildered retreat. In Antarctica, the ancient chair releases O'Neill. He doesn't move, doesn't breathe. For one terrible moment, you think they've lost him, that his consciousness scattered across 8,000 timelines couldn't find its way back to the single timeline where his body waits. Then his eyes snap open, not the brown eyes you remember, but something that seems to hold more light than eyes should, as if he's looking at you from 8,000 angles simultaneously. He takes a breath. Another speaks in a voice that sounds layered, harmonized, like 8,000 versions of Jack O'Neill speaking slightly out of sync. Mission accomplished. Earth saved. Timeline stable. Colonel O'Neill requesting permission to never do that again, sir. Then he passes out, and the monitors scream warnings about neural collapse, and Carter is running toward the chair screaming his name, and the doctor stands alone among his equipment with an expression that might be triumph or might be horror, because Jack O'Neill just did something that should have been impossible. He didn't just anchor the timeline, he rewrote it, and nobody knows yet what that means. O'Neill wakes up 3 days later in the SGC medical bay, and the first thing you notice is that he's wrong, not injured. The medical scans show no physical trauma beyond exhaustion, not broken. His vitals are stable, actually better than before the procedure, wrong in ways that make your skin crawl when you watch him through the observation window, ways that take you hours to articulate even to yourself. He moves slightly ahead of time, reaching for a water glass before the nurse offers it, turning his head toward the door 2 seconds before someone enters. His eyes track conversations happening in adjacent rooms that he shouldn't be able to hear. When Dr. Fraser asks him questions, he answers before she finishes speaking, not interrupting, but responding to words she hasn't said yet, as if the conversation is already complete from his perspective. He's experiencing temporal displacement on a neurological level. Carter explains during the briefing, exhaustion making her words flat. His consciousness is processing causality approximately 2 to 3 seconds ahead of linear time. He's not predicting the future, he's already living it. The doctor visits on the 4th day, entering the medical bay with the careful deliberation of someone approaching an unexploded bomb. O'Neill is sitting up staring at his hands, flexing fingers with the concentration of someone relearning how to inhabit their own body. Colonel, the doctor says quietly, and O'Neill's head snaps up before the sound fully registers, responding to the doctor's intention to speak rather than the speech itself. How many? O'Neill asks, and his voice is steadier now, closer to singular, but still carries that unsettling harmony. How many timelines am I experiencing right now? The doctor pulls up a chair, studying O'Neill with the clinical assessment of someone who has seen this transformation before and understands its weight. 17, he says after a moment.
Your consciousness has stabilized around 17 primary probability streets that branch from this moment. Most people experience one. Time Lords naturally perceive 3 to 5. You're existing in 17 simultaneously. O'Neill laughs, short and bitter. Lucky me. Do I get a prize, or just the lifetime of therapy I'm going to need? The testing begins immediately, Carter running cognitive assessments, Fraser monitoring neural patterns, Teal serving as a control subject for experiments that make everyone uncomfortable. They place objects in sealed boxes and ask O'Neill to identify them. He does, perfectly, every time, not through clairvoyance, but because he experiences the moment of opening before it happens, sees the object, then collapses back to the present carrying that memory. They show him tactical scenarios, enemy movements, strategic puzzles. He solves them instantly, having already played through every possible approach and outcome. It's not intelligence. O'Neill tries to explain during one session, frustration bleeding through his carefully maintained control. I'm not smarter, I'm just living faster. By the time you finish asking a question, I've already experienced answering it wrong 15 times and found the one timeline where I get it right. He looks at Carter with eyes that seem to hold too much light. I know how this conversation ends, son. All 17 ways it could end. And in 14 of them you're crying. So let's skip to the 2-way or not. Hammond calls an emergency meeting 48 hours after O'Neill regains consciousness. The conference room fills with the usual suspects plus representatives from Washington Area 51 and several alphabet agencies whose acronyms you don't recognize. O'Neill sits at the table, present but distant, occasionally writing notes on a pad of paper in handwriting that shifts between 17 distinct styles. The brass want answers. They want to know if the procedure was successful, if the threat is neutralized, if O'Neill is fit for duty, if his condition can be replicated for tactical advantage. The questions come rapid fire, hostile, treating a man who sacrificed his sanity as an asset to be evaluated rather than a person to be helped. The doctor watches with barely contained rage, but it's O'Neill who finally snaps. You want to know if I'm fit for duty? His voice drops to something cold and ancient. I just saved 7 billion lives by letting my consciousness shatter across 8,000 timelines. I held Earth's causality stable through an event that should have created a temporal paradox, ending all human history. I am the most fit for duty I've ever been. I'm also the most dangerous person in this facility. The room falls silent. O'Neill stands, and despite his regulation uniform, despite being surrounded by superior officers and federal agents, he suddenly looks like something other than human, something vast wearing a familiar face. I know what you're thinking, he says, and you realize he's not guessing. He's reading micro-expressions, body language, the 1,000 subtle tells that people emit before speaking. You're thinking this is an advantage, that having someone who experiences 17 timelines could give Earth a strategic edge. You're thinking about replicating the procedure, about creating more temporal anchors, about weaponizing what happened to me. He walks to the window overlooking the gate room, movements fluid and strange. I'm thinking about the 743 futures where that leads to temporal war, where Earth fractures into competing timelines fighting for dominance, where humanity splinters into probability streams that can never reunite, where we become everything the ancients feared when they built safeguards into their technology. He turns back to the room. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to classify this entire event at levels above top secret. You're going to bury the data so deep that no one can ever replicate it. And you're The debate that follows is brutal. Federal agents argue that O'Neill's condition represents a national security asset too valuable to waste on standard operations. Hammond defends his officer with the fury of a general who has sent too many good people into harm's way and
refuses to lose another. Carter presents medical data, suggesting that replicating the procedure would have a 97% fatality rate, that O'Neill's survival was an outlier bordering on miracle, that attempting to create more temporal anchors would likely produce only corpses and temporal anomalies. The doctor says nothing, watching O'Neill with an expression that might be sympathy or might be recognition, seeing himself reflected in a man transformed by necessity into something more and less than human. Finally, Hammond makes the call that will define his career's final years. O'Neill remains under SGC command, subject to medical monitoring, but otherwise treated as an active field officer. No replication attempts, no exploitation of his condition. The federal agents leave furious, making threats about oversight and budget cuts and congressional inquiries. Hammond looks like he's aged a decade in an afternoon, and O'Neill sits back down, shoulders slumping with relief. He doesn't voice. The personal cost reveals itself slowly, in moments that break your heart across the following weeks. O'Neill can't sleep normally anymore. He experiences dreams across 17 timelines simultaneously, waking exhausted from nights where he lived 17 different variations of rest and nightmare. He can't maintain relationships the way he used to, because he experiences every conversation's potential outcomes before speaking, analyzing which words will hurt least, which truths should stay buried, which futures are worth pursuing. You watch him sit alone in the commissary, surrounded by people but isolated by perception, existing 2 seconds ahead of everyone around him. Carter tries to help, running tests, developing medications, searching for any way to reduce the temporal load he carries. Nothing works. The ancient chair rewrote his neurology too thoroughly. He's permanently fractured, permanently displaced, permanently experiencing causality at 17 different angles. I'm becoming a stranger to myself, he admits during one late-night session when he thinks no one is recording. I remember who I was, but that person experienced one timeline, made choices without knowing all the outcomes. I can't do that anymore. Every decision, I see where it leads. All the ways it could go wrong. All the suffering I might prevent or cause. How do you stay human when you know too much? The doctor finds him on the observation deck overlooking the gate room at 0300 hours. Both men drawn to the Stargate like pilgrims to a shrine. Both understanding that the ancient ring is simultaneously salvation and curse. They stand in silence for long minutes before the doctor speaks. I've lived with temporal perception for 900 years across multiple regenerations. I've experienced causality from angles that would drive most species insane. I'm telling you this not to compare suffering, but to offer perspective. It gets easier. O'Neill doesn't turn, still watching the dormant Stargate, does it? Or do you just get better at pretending it does? The doctor considers this with the honesty the question deserves. Both, you learn to filter, to focus on the timelines that matter, to accept that knowing outcomes doesn't make you responsible for all of them. You learn that free will exists even when you can see the consequences of every choice. You learn. He stops, searching for words. You learn that being fractured across time doesn't make you broken. It makes you rare. Dangerous, yes, but also capable of seeing solutions that linear minds miss, of preventing catastrophes before they cascade, of saving lives in timelines that never happened because you saw them coming. O'Neill finally looks at him, and in the dim light of the observation deck, his eyes seem to hold reflections that don't match the room around him. Seeing through 17 versions of this moment, experiencing 17 variations of this conversation. Is that supposed to be comforting? The doctor smiles sadly. No, it's supposed to be true. Comfort comes later, if at all. Right now, you're in the hardest part, learning to live with what you've become without losing who you were. He places a hand on O'Neill's shoulder, the gesture grounding both men in the present moment, despite their fractured perceptions. You saved Earth, Colonel. Not just from the System Lords, but from itself. That temporal cascade you prevented would have trapped 7 billion people in a causality loop they'd never escape. You did that. The you that existed before the chair. The you that volunteered, knowing what it would cost. That person is still in there, experiencing 17 timelines, but still fundamentally Jack O'Neill. Below them the Stargate sits silent, patient as mountains, waiting for its next activation. And in the reflection on the observation window, you see two figures standing together. One human fractured across probability, one alien living between moments. Both of them trying to bear the weight of knowing too much. The session ends when Carter arrives, concern written across her features despite the late hour. She's been monitoring O'Neill's neural patterns remotely, tracking the biosigns they've implanted to ensure his condition doesn't destabilize further. You should be resting, she says, and there's something in her voice. Fear masked as professional concern, grief buried under scientific detachment. O'Neill knows what she's going to say before she finishes, has already experienced this conversation across multiple timelines. But he lets her speak anyway, because sometimes the illusion of normalcy is all that keeps you sane. I'm fine, Carter, or I'm not fine, but I'm stable. Pick whichever makes you feel better. Carter crosses her arms, channeling every ounce of determination that has carried her through years of impossible situations. I'm not giving up. There has to be a way to reduce your temporal perception, to filter the probability streams, to give you back some semblance of normal consciousness. I won't accept that you're just stuck like this forever. The doctor and O'Neill exchange glances, and for a moment, you see perfect understanding pass between them. The recognition of people who have both sacrificed pieces of themselves to save others, who carry wounds that can't be healed but must be endured. Sam, O'Neill says gently, using her first name in a way he rarely does, speaking with the authority of someone who has seen the future and knows which battles are worth fighting. Some prices can't be refunded, some changes can't be reversed. I knew that going in. I accepted it. Now I need you to accept it too, because I can't carry your guilt on top of everything else I'm experiencing. He reaches out, takes her hand, grounds himself in the present moment through the simple act of human contact. I'm different now, maybe permanently, but I'm still me. Still the guy who makes bad jokes at worst times. Still the commanding officer of the best damn team in the SGC. Still someone who would make the same choice again, if it meant saving Earth. Carter's composure breaks, tears streaming down her face despite years of military discipline. I just want my friend back. O'Neill pulls her into a hug, and over her shoulder he meets the doctor's eyes. In that gaze, you see the terrible understanding that comes from being changed by necessity, from becoming something other than what you were, because the alternative was letting everyone die. The doctor nods once, acknowledging what words cannot convey, then quietly leaves the observation deck. Below, the Stargate begins its daily diagnostic cycle, chevrons lighting in sequence, a reminder that the universe continues, regardless of personal cost. The TARDIS stands in the gate room like a promise and a threat,
her blue paint somehow brighter than standard police box blue. Her presence a reminder that the universe is larger and stranger than even the Stargate suggests. The Doctor has been preparing to leave for 3 days, running final diagnostics on Earth's Stargate, ensuring the temporal cascade won't repeat, teaching Carter emergency procedures for temporal anomalies that she prays she'll never need. You watch from the control room as he works, this impossible man who appeared without warning and changed everything, and you wonder what stories he'll tell about Earth when he's gone. Whether humanity will be another cautionary tale he mentions to warn species about playing with forces they don't understand, or something else, something rarer. Hammond stands beside you, reading a report from the Topra that arrived through encrypted channels an hour ago. His expression suggests the news isn't good. "Tell me," you say quietly, and Hammond hands you the tablet without looking away from the gate room below. The report details increased System Lord activity, unusual alliances forming, rumors spreading through the Jaffa Rebellion about Earth's temporal weapon, and the warrior who can see all futures. O'Neill's first mission back is to P7, J989, a routine diplomatic meeting with a minor Jaffa faction, considering rebellion against their System Lord. Standard procedure, SG-METI, 1+2 additional teams for security, establish contact, offer support without direct military intervention. Except nothing is standard anymore, because O'Neill walks through the Stargate experiencing 17 versions of the mission simultaneously. You monitor through UAV feeds, watching as the Colonel moves through the pre-rebel camp with eerie precision, positioning himself exactly where he needs to be, 3 seconds before threats emerge, speaking words that diffuse tensions before they escalate, reading the room with accuracy that borders on precognition, because from his perspective it is. The Jaffa leader, a scarred veteran named Korak, who served Apophis for 80 years before his first prime betrayed him, watches O'Neill with growing awe. "The rumors are true," he says, staff weapon lowering slightly. The Tari commander, who touched ancient minds and survived, who sees timelines before they unfold, who held his world steady while gods searched and could not find it. The words aren't a question, they're recognition, fear, something approaching reverence that makes O'Neill's jaw tighten with visible discomfort. Carter steps forward, diplomatic training asserting itself, trying to redirect the conversation toward practical matters of rebellion logistics and supply lines. But Korak isn't interested in logistics. He's interested in symbols, in legends, in the stories that will spread through slave populations and inspire them to rise against false gods. "We heard what you did," the Jaffa continues, addressing O'Neill directly. 3 System Lords came to destroy your world. You made your planet vanish, not through cloaking, not through shields. You removed Earth from time itself. He kneels, and the gesture sends ripples through his warriors. 50 Jaffa dropping to one knee before an off-worlder, an act of submission and respect that would have been unthinkable months ago. Teach us. Show us how to fight not just with staff weapons, but with minds that see what our masters cannot. Make us into weapons against tyranny as you were. Made. O'Neill's face goes carefully blank. The expression of someone who has experienced this conversation across 17 timelines and hates every version of it. "Get up," he says quietly, voice carrying absolute authority. "I'm not a god, not a weapon, not a symbol. I'm a soldier who made a choice because the alternative was unacceptable. You want to fight the Goa'uld, fight them with courage, with unity, with the knowledge that you deserve freedom, not because some off-worlder gave it to you, but because you took it yourselves." The mission continues awkwardly. Alliance,
established but strained by the weight of expectations O'Neill never asked to carry. The team returns through the Stargate. 7 hours later, and you watch O'Neill shed his tactical vest with movements that suggest exhaustion beyond the physical. In the debriefing, he's clinical, precise, reporting facts without the usual humor that makes mission reports bearable. They see me as proof that humans can evolve beyond mortality, he says flatly, that we can touch ancient technology and become something greater. They're going to build a mythology around what happened in Antarctica, and there's nothing I can do to stop it. Hammond leans back, decades of command experience reading the subtext beneath O'Neill's words. Are you requesting to be pulled from active field duty? The question hangs in the air like smoke. O'Neill considers it, experiencing 17 versions of his answer, finally settling on the truth that exists in all of them. No, sir, because pulling me off the field means someone else takes missions that I could complete with minimal casualties. I've seen the timelines. I know which choices save lives. I can't not use that knowledge just because it makes people uncomfortable. The weight of that admission, the recognition that O'Neill's sacrifice has made him too valuable to protect, settles over the room like a shroud. Intelligence reports over the following weeks confirm what Korik's reaction suggested. Earth's reputation in the galaxy is shifting. The Tok'ra send increasingly worried messages about system lords consolidating power, not to attack Earth but to defend against it, viewing humanity as an emerging threat on par with the replicators, or ancient technology run amok. Jaffa rebels request audiences with the Tory, specifically with O'Neill, treating him as a prophet rather than a soldier. Even the Asgard express concern through Commander Thor's typically understated language. We have observed unusual interest in Earth's temporal capabilities from species that should not be aware of such technology. Your planet has attracted attention from forces beyond our current conflict parameters. Hammond calls the senior staff together, and the meeting has the feeling of standing at a crossroads where every path leads to war. We saved Earth, he begins without preamble, prevented an invasion, protected 7 billion lives, and in doing so, we've made ourselves a target of an entirely different kind of threat. Not conquest, not exploitation. Fear. He pulls up a star map, showing known system lord territories, and you see it immediately. Defensive consolidation, resources being redirected, alliances forming not to attack but to contain. The Doctor attends the meeting despite preparing to leave. His presence a reminder that Earth's problems exist in a much larger context than the Milky Way galaxy. This is what I warned about, he says quietly, not with satisfaction, but with the weariness of someone who has watched this pattern repeat across civilizations. You became important, and now the galaxy is adjusting around you, trying to determine whether you're a threat to be eliminated, or a power to be courted, or a wild card best left alone. He brings up footage from his own surveillance, transmitted through TARDIS sensors that can monitor subspace communications across light years. Gold system lords debating in chambers that look like temples, voices overlaid with mechanical harmonics, discussing the Tory problem with a seriousness previously reserved for the Asgard. They're doing what all threatened powers do, trying to understand you, predict you, control you, and because they can't do any of those things, they're starting to fear you. Carter asks the question everyone is thinking. How do we walk this back? How do we convince them we're not a threat? The Doctor's smile is sad. You can't. That ship sailed the moment O'Neill held Earth's timeline stable through sheer force of will. You've proven you can do things even the ancients considered theoretical. There's no pretending to be harmless after that. O'Neill stands at the window overlooking the gate room, experiencing 17 versions of this conversation, seeing the futures that branch from every decision the room might make. In 14 timelines, Earth becomes increasingly militarized, building fleets to match the threat they've become, fulfilling the galaxy's fears through self-fulfilling prophecy. In 2 timelines, Earth withdraws, seals the Stargate, hides, and gets invaded anyway by forces that won't allow a temporal-capable species to exist unchecked. In 1 timeline, the fragile balance holds Earth neither retreating nor advancing, maintaining defensive posture while building alliances carefully, proving through actions rather than words that they're not the threat the galaxy fears. That one, O'Neill says aloud, pointing at a probability stream only he can see. That's the timeline where we survive the next decade. It requires precise diplomatic maneuvering, approximately 7 crucial decisions at specific moments, and a lot of luck. But it's possible. Hammond studies his officer, this man who has become something between human and oracle, weapon and warning. Can you guide us through it? See those 7 decisions coming, and ensure we make the right choices. O'Neill's expression is complicated. Part hope, part dread, entirely honest. Yes, sir, that's exactly what scares me. The doctor's departure comes on a grey Thursday morning. No fanfare, no official ceremony, just the key personnel gathered in the gate room to watch an impossible man return to his impossible ship. Carter has spent the past week downloading every conversation they had, every equation he shared, every warning about temporal mechanics into classified files that will take decades to fully understand. Teals offers the doctor a Jaffa warrior's salute, fist to chest, acknowledging a fellow soldier in wars that span galaxies. Hammond shakes his hand with the firm grip of military men who have fought impossible battles and understand the cost of command. O'Neill stands slightly apart, experiencing 17 versions of this goodbye, and you see tears in 14 of them. The doctor stops before him last, and for a moment they simply look at each other. 2 men fractured across time, bearing wounds that can't be explained to people who experience causality linearly. You'll be all right, the doctor says, and it's not a question or a hope, but a statement of fact. I've seen your timeline extend decades into the future. You'll save thousands of lives. Stop wars before they start. Guide Earth through the most dangerous period in its history. And you'll hate every moment of feeling like a puppet master, even while knowing you're preventing catastrophe. O'Neill's laugh is short, bitter, but genuine. Thanks. Really know how to send a guy off feeling good about himself. Then more seriously, will you come back? If things get bad, if we need someone who understands what I've become. The doctor considers this, sonic screwdriver already in hand, TARDIS key glinting in the fluorescent lights. I'll be watching, not constantly. The TARDIS and I have other emergencies across time and space, but I've bookmarked Earth in my timeline. If you face temporal threats, if O'Neill's condition destabilizes, if the galaxy turns on you with force you can't counter, I'll know, I'll come. He turns to address the room, voice carrying that particular authority that comes from having saved worlds and lost them too. You're standing at a threshold. Behind you is the Earth that explored the galaxy in secret, learning, growing, occasionally stumbling but always recovering. Ahead is something else. Earth as a known power, watched, evaluated, feared. You can't go back. You can only go forward. Do it carefully.
Do it with the principles that made you worth saving in the first place. Don't become the monsters you fought just because you're strong enough to be scary. With that, he enters the TARDIS. The door closes. The light on top begins to pulse, and that impossible sound, like the universe groaning, fills the gate room. The TARDIS fades from reality with a final wheeze of displaced air, leaving only a slight scorch mark on the concrete where she stood. The gate room feels emptier without her presence, as if a possibility has been removed from the world. You return to your monitoring station, pulling up the latest intelligence reports, and realize that the work continues, has to continue, because Earth is important now, and being important is dangerous. O'Neill stays in the gate room long after everyone else leaves, standing before the Stargate, experiencing 17 versions of the galaxy's future. In some, Earth becomes a legend, the world that touched time and survived. In others, Earth becomes a cautionary tale, the species that reached too far and paid the price. In one, just one, Earth becomes something rarer, an example, proof that a young species can gain power without losing compassion, can become dangerous without becoming monstrous, can change the galaxy without conquering it. That's the one. O'Neill whispers to the empty room, to the dormant Stargate, to the 17 versions of himself experiencing this moment. That's the timeline worth fighting for. Above him in the control room, alarms begin the familiar wail. Unscheduled gate activation. Incoming wormhole. Another crisis. Another chance to prove Earth deserves the legend it's becoming. O'Neill turns toward the ramp, shoulders squared, carrying the weight of 17 timelines toward whatever comes next. The legend has begun. The galaxy is watching. And somewhere in the space between moments, a blue box spins through the vortex, its pilot monitoring Earth's progress, ready to return if the timeline fractures too far, hoping, as he always hopes, that this time will be different. 5 years pass like water through broken fingers. You've been promoted twice, transferred to oversight operations, gained security clearances that give you access to files most generals will never see. Tonight you stand in the archives beneath Cheyenne Mountain, pulling records that shouldn't exist about events that officially never happened. And you think about the cost of legends. The Doctor Who enters Stargate universe file sits before you. 3,000 pages of classified testimony, temporal mathematics, psychological evaluations, and a single photograph of a blue police box that shouldn't fit in a 10x8 frame, but does anyway. You've read this file 17 times, once for each timeline O'Neill experiences, and every time you discover something new. Tonight it's a note in the margins of the Doctor's final debriefing, written in handwriting that shifts between 17 distinct styles. Some prices can't be refunded.
Some changes can't be reversed. But Earth is still here. That has to count for something. The date on the note is 3 weeks ago. O'Neill still updates this file, still records his thoughts, still tries to make sense of what he became when he saved the world. The galaxy has changed in those 5 years, shaped by choices made by a man who sees futures before they crystallize. Earth has fought 3 major wars against Anubis's super soldiers, against a replicator incursion, against an Ori advance force, and won all 3 with casualties mysteriously lower than projections suggested. Military analysts attribute it to improved tactics and better intelligence. You know the truth. O'Neill stands in command centers, experiencing 17 versions of every battle simultaneously, seeing which orders save lives, which flanking maneuvers trap enemies, which retreats prevent massacres. He's become what the galaxy feared, a tactical mind that operates outside normal causality. But he's also become something the galaxy didn't expect. A guardian who uses that power exclusively for defense, never conquest. The Tok'ra send annual reports tracking System Lord reactions to Earth's continued survival. Most have stopped viewing humanity as a threat. A few have started viewing Earth as something stranger, a protector, a stabilizing force, a species that gained godlike power and chose not to become gods. O'Neill looks older than 5 years should make him. You see him occasionally in the commissary at hours when normal people sleep, sitting alone staring at coffee that's gone cold while experiencing 17 versions of morning simultaneously. The temporal load hasn't decreased. If anything, it's intensified as his neural pathways adapted to processing probability streams with increasing efficiency. He can see further now, track timelines up to 72 hours ahead with reasonable accuracy, enough to prevent most catastrophes before they begin. But the isolation has deepened. He divorced after 2 years. His wife couldn't live with a man who experienced every conversation they might have before speaking, who knew how arguments would end before they started, who looked at her with eyes that held too much future and not enough present. Carter visits him weekly, bringing coffee and companionship, trying to maintain the friendship that sustained SG-1 through impossible missions. But even she admits in her private logs that it's hard to connect with someone who lives 2 seconds ahead of you, who responds to questions before you finish asking, who knows how you feel before you've processed the emotion yourself. The summons comes on a Tuesday. Hammond requests your presence in the VIP quarters, highest security, no explanation given. You arrive to find the room transformed into something out of Victorian England. All dark wood and brass fixtures, and a blue police box sitting in the corner as if it belongs. The doctor looks exactly as he did 5 years ago, which shouldn't surprise you but does anyway. Time travelers don't age predictably. He's reviewing holographic displays that shimmer in the air, data streams showing Earth's timeline branching and converging, probability calculations that make your head ache just glancing at them. Ah, he says without turning around. The archivist, the one who records everything. I've been reading your reports. Quite thorough. You have a gift for capturing the human cost behind the tactical victories. He finally looks at you, and his expression is complicated. Pride mixed with sorrow, approval tainted by guilt. How is he? O'Neill. The reports say stable, functional, effective, but reports lie about things that matter. You consider diplomatic answers, professional distance, the careful language you've learned in 5 years of classified operations. Then you choose honesty. He's dying, not physically, temporarily. Every day he experiences more futures, sees more outcomes, carries more timelines that didn't happen. He's disappearing into probability while his body keeps functioning. In another 5 years, I don't think there'll be anything left of Jack O'Neill, except a consciousness scattered across 10,000 futures, wearing his face like a uniform. The doctor closes his eyes, and for a moment he looks as old as O'Neill's eyes suggest. Ancient, weary, carrying the weight of too many worlds saved at costs too high to justify. I knew this was a possibility, he says quietly. Time Lord neurology is built for temporal perception. Human neurology isn't. I hoped O'Neill would stabilize, find equilibrium, learn to filter the probability streams. Instead, he's adapted by processing more of them, experiencing causality at deeper resolution, becoming more efficient at seeing futures at the cost of being present in any of them. He opens his eyes, and they hold a determination.
You recognize from 5 years ago when he first proposed using O'Neill as an anchor. Take me to him. Now, there might still be time to help, if he'll let me. You lead the doctor through corridors he navigated 5 years ago, past security checkpoints that recognize him, despite no record of his existence in current databases, down to Observation Deck 7, where O'Neill spends most nights watching the Stargate and experiencing 17 versions of tomorrow. He's standing at the window when you arrive, and he turns before the door opens, responding to your intention to enter rather than the action itself. When he sees the doctor, something like relief crosses his face. Took you long enough. I've been seeing this reunion for 3 weeks. In most timelines, you bring bad news. In 2, you bring hope. Let's skip ahead to which one this is. The doctor approaches slowly, studying O'Neill with the clinical assessment of someone who understands temporal neurology better than any human specialist. You're fragmenting faster than I projected. The temporal load should have stabilized at 17 primary probability streams. You're currently processing 34, and the number is increasing geometrically. O'Neill laughs, the sound harsh in the empty observation deck. 37, as of this morning. 39, if we're counting micro-timelines that branch and converge within hours. I'm becoming what the ancients would have called a probability nexus, a consciousness that exists across so many timelines simultaneously that I stop being an individual and become a statistical function. He meets the doctor's eyes without flinching. I'm dying. I know that. I've seen my own death 37 different ways, some within months, some within decades. But Earth is stable. The wars we've won, the catastrophes I've prevented, the lives saved by seeing disasters before they manifest. That's worth the price. It has to be. The doctor shakes his head, and there's genuine anger in his expression now. No, it doesn't. One man's sanity is not worth a planet, not even one as strategically important as Earth. We're going to fix this. What follows is the most complex medical procedure in human history, conducted in a facility that officially doesn't exist using technology that shouldn't be compatible. The doctor connects the ancient chair in Antarctica to the TARDIS's temporal stabilizers, creating a feedback loop that will allow him to literally reach into O'Neill's fractured consciousness and pull the scattered pieces back together. Carter runs the technical side, her hands steady, despite terror that shows in every line of her body. Teal stands guard, aware that this procedure could kill O'Neill or turn him into a temporal paradox that unravels Earth's timeline completely. Hammond watches from the control room, hand hovering over the abort protocol, ready to end the experiment if it threatens the planet he's sworn to protect. And you record everything, because someone needs to document what happens when you try to save a man who has sacrificed his linearity to protect 7 billion people who will never know his name. O'Neill sits in the ancient chair one final time, strapped in not for safety, but to prevent his body from responding to the 37 timelines his mind experiences simultaneously. The doctor stands beside him, sonic screwdriver in one hand, TARDIS interface in the other, looking more uncertain than you've ever seen him. This might work, he says honestly, or it might kill you, or it might fragment you further. I've never attempted temporal reintegration on this scale. O'Neill's response is immediate, spoken across 37 simultaneous timelines with perfect harmony. Doc, I've been dead in 17 timelines and saved the universe in 20. One more gamble won't change the cosmic average. The procedure begins with a to sound like reality screaming. You watch through monitors as O'Neill's consciousness, visible somehow through ancient technology, that translates neural activity into holographic representation, fractures further before collapsing inward, 37 probability streams converging toward a single point. The Doctor works with desperate precision, using the TARDIS to anchor O'Neill's timeline, while the ancient chair filters out futures that don't lead to this moment, collapsing quantum probability into classical causality. It should be impossible. It violates every principle of temporal mechanics you've learned in 5 years of studying this technology. But the Doctor is very, very good at making impossible things work. And O'Neill is stubborn enough to hold his consciousness together through sheer force of will, even as it's being rewritten at the quantum level. The procedure lasts 17 minutes. By the end, O'Neill's neural activity has stabilized to something approaching human normal. Not perfectly linear. He'll always experience causality slightly ahead of baseline, but manageable, survivable. When O'Neill wakes, the first thing he says is, "I can't see tomorrow anymore." His voice breaks on the words, and you realize with gut-wrenching clarity that he's not relieved. He's terrified. For 5 years, he's experienced every morning before waking, known every threat before it materialized, guided Earth through crises by seeing them coming. Now he's back to human perception, living one moment at a time, uncertain of outcomes, forced to make decisions without knowing how they'll end. Carter holds his hand, tears streaming freely. Now that military protocol no longer matters, Teal'c places a steadying grip on his shoulder. Hammond's voice comes over the speakers, rough with emotion he usually keeps buried beneath General's bearing. "Welcome back, Colonel. We've got you." The Doctor steps back, sonic screwdriver lowered, looking exhausted in ways that transcend physical tiredness. "You're human again," he tells O'Neill quietly. "Limited.
Mortal.
Capable of being surprised by tomorrow. I'm sorry I couldn't fix you without taking away what made you extraordinary." O'Neill closes his eyes, experiencing a single timeline for the first time in 5 years, and smiles. "Don't be. Being extraordinary was killing me. Being human might actually let me live." The aftermath unfolds over weeks that feel like years. O'Neill undergoes psychological evaluation, retraining his decision-making processes to function without temporal precognition, learning to trust instinct over certainty. Earth's strategic planning shifts subtly but significantly. Where O'Neill once guided policy by seeing optimal futures, now he guides
through hard-won experience and tactical brilliance that doesn't require Oracle-level perception. The galaxy notices. System lords who had grudgingly accepted Earth's defensive capabilities begin testing boundaries again, probing for weakness. But Earth holds because O'Neill's 5 years of temporal guidance built systems robust enough to function without constant Oracle oversight. The Tok'ra send a message that makes you smile despite its formal diplomatic language. The Tok'ra have demonstrated an unexpected quality, the ability to become dangerous without remaining monstrous. This is rare among species who gain power quickly. The Doctor stays for 3 weeks, ensuring O'Neill's reintegration remains stable, then prepares to leave. His farewell is quieter this time. No grand speeches, just honest gratitude for a species that surprised him. "You did it," he tells Hammond during their final meeting. "You became important without becoming terrible. Earth is a legend now, not for power, but for restraint, for choosing protection over conquest even when you had the capability for both. That's rarer than you know." You're present for the Doctor's final conversation with O'Neill, held in the gate room at 0300 hours. Because some conversations can only happen in liminal spaces and times. They don't shake hands. They don't exchange pleasantries. They simply stand before the Stargate. Two men who touched temporal power and survived, carrying scars that can't be explained to people who experience time linearly. I saw you, O'Neill says quietly, in the futures I can't access anymore. I saw you returning to Earth again and again across centuries, watching humanity grow, sometimes helping, sometimes just witnessing. In the timeline where I stayed fractured, we met 4 more times before my consciousness dissipated completely. In this timeline, he stops, choosing words carefully. In this timeline, we meet twice more. Once during a crisis I can't remember the details of. Once at the end, when Earth faces something that makes system lords look like children playing with toys. The Doctor doesn't ask how O'Neill knows this, doesn't question whether residual temporal perception lingers. He simply nods, then I'll be here, both times. Because that's what we do. We show up for the impossible moments and try to make sure the people we care about survive them. The TARDIS fades from the gate room with her familiar song, and you're left with silence and the weight of documented history. You return to the archives, updating files, recording the Doctor's second visit, noting O'Neill's successful reintegration. But the story doesn't end cleanly. Legends never do. O'Neill remains on active duty, still commands respect that borders on reverence, still makes decisions that save lives through brilliance rather than precognition. But he's different, slower to speak, more hesitant in judgment, occasionally gripped by phantom memories of timelines he can no longer access. Carter describes it as temporal phantom limb syndrome, the neurological echo of abilities that have been removed. Some nights you find him in the observation deck, staring at the Stargate, and you wonder if he regrets losing his oracle sight, if he misses being able to prevent every tragedy before it unfolds, if being human again feels like blindness after 5 years of seeing every possible tomorrow. You never ask. Some questions have answers that hurt more than uncertainty. The galaxy continues its complex dance. System lords rise and fall. The Ori threat looms on the horizon. The replicators evolve in ways that suggest intelligence beyond programming. Earth faces each crisis with resources built during O'Neill's Oracle years, but maintained through human determination and adaptability. Years later, 10-15, time becomes fluid when you've spent decades managing classified timelines. You receive a package with no return address. Inside is a journal, leather-bound, filled with handwriting that shifts between 37 distinct styles before stabilizing into one. O'Neill's chronicle of his temporal years, written during the 3 weeks between his reintegration and the moment he could finally process what he'd experienced. You read it in one sitting, unable to stop despite the weight of every page. He describes the isolation of living ahead of everyone around him, the terrible knowledge of watching friends make mistakes he could prevent, but shouldn't, because free will matters more than optimal outcomes. He writes about the guilt of surviving when the temporal load should have killed him, of being grateful for abilities that destroyed him even while recognizing they saved millions. The final entry is dated yesterday. It reads, "The doctor was right. Some prices can't be refunded. I gave 5 years of my sanity to save Earth, and I'd do it again. But I'm glad I only had to do it once. Being a legend is exhausting. Being human is hard. But being alive to complain about both, that's the real miracle." Jack, you close the journal and look at the photograph, paperclip to the cover. O'Neill standing with SG-1, taken last week,
looking older but genuinely smiling. Behind them, barely visible in the gate room's shadows, you can make out the faint outline of a blue box that shouldn't be there, because the Doctor is supposedly exploring a different timeline entirely. But time travelers don't follow rules about when and where they appear, and you understand with perfect clarity that he's watching. He's always watching, ready to return if Earth needs him, hoping humanity continues to surprise him by solving crises without divine intervention. The archives are quiet at this hour, filled with records of impossible events and the people who survived them. You file O'Neill's journal in the section marked Personal Accounts, Temporal Phenomena, between a report on ancient time travel technology and a single blue card that reads Police Public Call Box in faded white letters. Tomorrow, you'll write your final report on the Doctor Who enters Stargate universe incident. Tonight, you simply sit with the weight of history and think about the cost of legends. Jack O'Neill sacrificed 5 years of his sanity to save 7 billion people who will never know his name. The Doctor appeared twice, saved a world, and disappeared back into the time vortex. Earth survived not through superior firepower or ancient technology, but through the willingness of ordinary people to make extraordinary sacrifices. The Stargate sits silent in its room 28 levels below, patient as stone, waiting for tomorrow's activation. Somewhere in the space between moments, a blue box spins through the vortex, carrying a man who has seen this story repeat across 1,000 worlds and still hopes this time will be different. And in a small apartment in Colorado Springs, Jack O'Neill sleeps his first dreamless sleep in 5 years, experiencing one timeline, one future, one moment at a time. He is no longer an oracle, no longer a legend, just a man who saved the world and survived long enough to remember the cost. That has to count for something. You close the file, seal the archives, and walk through corridors that have witnessed miracles and tragedies in equal measure. The cost of saving Earth was measured in sanity, in relationships, fractured across timelines, in a man who touched infinity and barely managed to come back. But Earth is still here. The Stargate still opens to distant worlds. Humanity still reaches for stars with courage that borders on recklessness and hope that refuses to die. The legend is complete, the price is paid, and tomorrow, the gate will activate again, and someone will step through into the unknown, and the story will continue, because that's what legends do. They inspire the next generation to reach further, risk more, refuse to accept that some prices are too high to pay for survival. Jack O'Neill's sacrifice taught Earth that lesson. The Doctor's interventions reinforced it, and somewhere in the files you maintain, in the archives, no one will read for decades. That truth is preserved for the day when humanity needs to remember. Some heroes save the world, some heroes save themselves. The rarest heroes do both, and live long enough to wonder if they should have.